Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. Even in her dream, a sense of joyful excitement had started to dawn on her. She was dreaming of her husband. John pressed her to him, and it made the girl feel insanely good. So she opened her eyes and slid through the apartment still at dawn. The sun's rays drew on the wallpaper an intricate pattern. She threw back the sheet, allowing it to continue traveling over her naked body. Slyara sat up on the bed and stretched. The sweet theme had finally developed. The illuminating morning chill presented itself. Slyara got up, walked to the bathroom, and turned on the cool shower. She had practiced this for several years now. Hot water used to make it hard to concentrate, take away energy. But this way, it was like a second breath. You come out fresh and full of energy, immediately ready to engage in the day's hustle and bustle. Ahead of her awaits a new day, and in the evening a restaurant or the girl grinned dinner with her son, and hers too, though adopted. But it was she who had been by his side for 2 years, going to parent-teacher conferences, listening to his revelations about his relationships with friends and teachers. Did she feel like a mom? She was only 3 years older. No, she didn't want to be. Her husband just wanted to give the guy the illusion of marital happiness, so she went along with the game. He got lucky with her. He was 38 when they met. His first wife, Jacob's mother, passed away when he was only 4 years old. The guy often told Clara that he does not even remember what she looked like. The boy was raised by his grandmother Marlo on his mother. She was physically weak, and every year her health was deteriorating. It was enough only for the most basic care of food and clothes for the child. Therefore, Slaga in the person of Jacob got a Terry triplets, which in addition was in the midst of puberty. No one could find a common language with the teenager. Complaints came from teachers and neighbors, and with his stepmother he became friends only years later when he turned into an angry, handsome young man. How she managed it, no one knew, but she was the only one he seemed to obey in public, and John was never able to win his son's trust. And did he want to? He went from one term to the next, and when he came back, he was in the pubs. It was a way of life that finally got to his mother. She died, leaving her negligent son a big house in the center of town. That's where John brought his new wife. At first, Jacob met her in the bayonet. He reminded the girl of the shield in her stomach, of his former self from his pack, the lonely, hungry, angry one. Clara was defiant and implacable with him as well. She was always the leader and considered herself the mistress of the house. That's why she went straight to the bottle in any dispute. Young, sensual, and passionate, she wanted to live only by her own rules and had no pity for the boy. He was in the way. She didn't need him at all. They disliked each other intensely, fought so much that they seemed to fight. She was very much in love with John at the time. She knew of his criminal record and knew he'd never put a stop to it. But the man was as handsome as God, and he was charming and generous. Strong, tall, with big, bright green eyes, a strong-willed chin, a dazzling and snow-white smile. A dandy. Dressed well-groomed. He liked to look after himself in the wild. He played sports, went to the tanning salon. He had enough money for metal ceramics, expensive clothes, restaurants, and women. Clara fell in love with him at first sight. As soon as she saw him in one of the popular night spots in the city, he too could not remain indifferent to the young Smuglyanka. Many people paid attention to her. Seeing her once in a restaurant, the man felt that this time before him is an interesting woman, and she will not be an easy prey. Flexible in an open, short, olive-colored dress, she walked confidently down the hall. She moved easily, smoothly, even though she was wearing high-heeled shoes, carelessly fixing her heavy, deep chocolate-colored hair, smooth as silk, with a look of big eyes snatched in the crowd of men worthy of his attention. Daring, risky, daring such, and did not meet on the way John Marlo. Seeing her, he immediately began the hunt. He himself came to the table where she sat with her friends and glared at her with his eyes. He put an expensive bottle of champagne in the middle. my treat. Trial of strength, he with his low pro-chicken voice will not be enough, will order more. What's that for? That proudly threw her head down. Clara, we're sitting pretty good. I see you're sitting even better. The man turned around and went to his table. Sophia admired Slaga's friend Sophia. Chill. She gave him a piercing glare. I could smell him a mile away. That cat. Hogarth, yeah, you take after, Sophia giggled. I felt it too. Only you won't, because I won't. At the height of the evening, John and Clara joined together on the dance floor. They were irresistibly attracted to each other. Marlowe could only wonder that his new acquaintance was so confident, so young, and so bright. Her intelligence and grace could be envied by mature women whom John valued so much. At the end of the evening, he was enchanted by the girl. He was afraid to admit to himself that she had hit him right in the heart. The daring, swarthy girl was unlike the ladies he had met before. She was interesting. Among the many charming, intelligent, and beautiful women, she stood out. An inexplicable thrill arose in the soul of the man. He wanted to drown in his relationship with her. John caught himself thinking that all his previous romances were boring. Unremarkable meetings with a slight tinge of sympathy. How many of them had been so evocative of his quiet interest? Dozens, hundreds. In general, John moved only one desire to satisfy sexual hunger and replenish his male collection. By and large, they were ladies for a night, for a week, at best for a month. But Slaga, she attracted her sensuality, her passion, and at the same time was in the border boyfriend. With her you could get drunk, talk frankly, and even get mind-blowing quality sex. I didn't want to part with her. She was looking for strength, such inner confidence that involuntarily there was a desire to obey, trust, give into the hands of this goddess all the reins of love and enjoy. John had seen other beauties like her, but they didn't have the charms that Clara had. He wanted her all the time. Every movement of her gaze was like a volcano of desire, an unparalleled rare trait. He was amazed to find himself admiring her swift gait, the radiant smile, the way she gestured. John realized that an early unexplored feeling had stirred in the back of his mind. It was an attraction. The condition was unusual for him. He was bathed in the cocktail, the excitement, the involvement. He couldn't understand what it was about this girl that attracted him. It was something elusive. He didn't feel a shadow of embarrassment in her presence. He had every fantasy with her. Next to Clara, he was physically aroused, uninhibited and bold. He did not immediately realize that it was his woman. At first he just went to the light, flew to the young girl like a moth. Only later he noticed that he never got bored near her, never thought about business or about someone else. She absorbed all his attention, and she ridiculously came to him with stupid talk about love or pathetic sentimental feelings. Next to her one could be any debauchery, drunken, schoolboyish. John realized that in front of him was a strong personality, and whatever their relationship in the future, he would not be able to possess her completely. The girl would always have her own world hidden from him. Only at will she will open the door to him, but will not let him in completely. Let's get married. He proposed to her a week after we met. So serious, she laughed. Yeah, I think we're right for each other. Or maybe I'm wrong. He asked. No, it looked like it. Clara nodded and made her way to his lips. John felt himself getting turned on. I'll be yours. The girl slowly backed away from him. If you show class tonight. Clara drilled the man with her velvet brown eyes, and John moved to follow her. Such games thrilled him, boosted his male ego, released his instincts. To my place, he suggested. Let's go. Clara shook her head, and her luxurious hair spread over her round shoulders. Soon, they were speeding by cab through the night city. Entering the rented apartment, Slaga herself led him to the bedroom. The room was in semi-darkness. She turned on only one night lamp. The girl, without false shame, threw off her dress. There was nothing under it. John followed her example. He looked admiringly at her slender young body, then boldly approached her and embraced her. In intimacy, she belonged completely. He was resourceful, then pitching left, then slipping away, then passionate, then indifferent. Always different, always unpredictable. He enjoyed his woman, her animal, magnetism. A look, not arbitrary body movements, atomic size. Next to her, the whole world was just a backdrop for their love. John married her and brought her into the house as a mistress. The new status was to her liking. She enthusiastically took care of repairs and household problems. Marlowe's son was confronted with the fact of his marriage and told to obey Slaga. The teenager circled the newlyweds with a contemptuous look, glared, and locked himself in his room. For a month, he barely spoke to them one syllable, answering questions and avoiding all contact. In time, he got used to it, but in every way he showed his contempt for his newfound mother. And with his father he was cold. Of course, he had no time for his son. During the day, he disappeared on his business, in the evening in the bedroom with his young wife. But the boy's behavior irritated him. One night, when John was asleep, the girl drank champagne in the kitchen. She heard a key turn in the lock. It was Jacob, returning from a nightclub. He walked into the kitchen and saw Clara sitting in just her panties on the windowsill. "Hey you, we need to talk," she started. "I demand basic respect from you. Why don't you go stripper first?" "Who the hell are you to pay attention to you?" Jacob replied. "I'm kind of your mom. You know, Dad's got a new term coming up. He's not gonna let go of his habits. You didn't have time to draw your father here, and you thought you knew everything about everyone. I don't mean that kind of longing. Father had the sea." At these words, Clara jumped up to the teenager and slapped him. "You say that again, I'll bury you, puppy. You don't realize who you're dealing with." I'm the only one who understood Jacob, at first taken aback, then rubbed the sore spot with his hand, and suddenly sharply grabbed Clara by the arms and pinned behind her back, bent her forward. "I'll try to do it again. You're older, but think with your head. Who are you smiling at? I'm taller than you and stronger. I've been fighting for a long time. So get out of here before you get your ass kicked." The guy let the girl go. Wow. A cheeky grin spread across his face. "You're not as easy as you look." She got a kick out of him. "Okay, you surprised me, come to me. Now that you've started, I take my ambition back." Jacob looked at the swarthy, beautiful girl. She was good. The guy decided to use her and tell his father about it. "I'll take you," excitedly, he said. "Take off your clothes." The girl gasped, and he turned on the camera. Jacob approached her and possessed her. In his emerald eyes only hatred shone. Then he left her alone, picked up his things from the floor. He went to his room. He filmed the whole process in his room several times. He watched the video. "So much for the dirt. I'll show my father tomorrow," he decided as he fell asleep. The guy woke up to someone's hands caressing. His body threw back the sheet. He tried to push her away. Yesterday's contact was for fun. Liar. What a wheezing cunt. Jacob grabbed the girl by the neck and threw her on her stomach. "Where is the father?" he asked. When it was over, "Where did he go?" whispered Clara. "What time is it?" 12 o'clock. Through the open window could be heard the car rumble of people's voices, children's laughter. It was a day off and many people were leaving for the dacha. She got up and went to take a shower. She came back half an hour later. "You hear that? Can you stop walking around the house naked?" Jacob turned to her. "You're your father's value, but to me you're one of 1,000. We'll see about that." The girl glared at him. Together, they stayed in his bedroom until deep into the night. Waking up at 0 o'clock, Jacob went into the kitchen. The house was dark. That's odd. His father never came back. He got worried, then went to his room. It was empty. Jacob woke up Clara. "Father is still gone," he told her. The girl reluctantly got out of bed, fumbled with the sheet, and took the phone from the nightstand. Dialed Marlowe's number several times. No answer, she sighed. Strange, he hadn't set foot in a casino in 3 months. He hasn't been hitting on any chicks yet. I'm on a roll. Come on, get dressed. Let's hit the hot spots. I pulled on a wide sweater and jeans over my naked body. Clara jumped into the driver's seat, pressed the klaxon a few times. Why are you ringing the whole street? Jacob approached and got indignant. Sit down, son. And frowned. Intuition tells me that I need to hurry. The engine roared and the car took off. Drove it just as I loved it. As they say, without brakes. In this case, it was not even in the figurative sense. But we quickly bypassed all the unfortunate places. Marlowe Sr. was nowhere to be seen. There is only one place left. The girl stretched out. And in a couple of minutes they arrived at the police station. Yes, yes, tired nodded the duty officer. Took John on a theft at a jeweler's. You know he's the kind of guy who doesn't stay out long. But Jacob cursed profanely. That's pathological. You're in my hands now. The kid smirked at Syl as promptly as ever. And for me, in general, and on time to go home. Now we'll see him only after the trial and then on big holidays. Marlowe was sentenced to 3 years. He was sent to a high-security colony to serve his sentence. Clara came to see him for a long visit. He was released to a hotel for 24 hours. To her surprise, he first pounced on the food, and then already on her. The girl was standing by the window. He came up behind her and began to caress her neck, collarbones, breasts. The man imperiously turned her to himself, encircled her face with his palms, and completely given over to the power of his feelings, passionately penetrated her mouth. She wrapped her arms around her husband's neck, drawing him to her. Clara felt the pounding of his heart quicken. John covered the girl's body with short, vigorous kisses, freed her from her clothes, picked her up in his arms, and carried her to the bed. Then Clara lay on his shoulder, and he caressed the strands of her lustrous chocolate hair. Why are you cold? Did you find someone else? He asked. Don't talk nonsense, she whispered back. I'm just tired. I'll make up for it. She started kissing his ear, but I recognize my initiative, girl. With you, it's like heaven. He kissed passionately. The girl's flaccid lips. Their dance of love continued until dawn. Marlowe was satisfied. John, we're running out of money with Jacob. What do we do? Clara asked him in the morning. Don't worry, sweetheart. Just don't give your soul to anyone but me for it. Won't you need money? I've got plenty in reserve. There's enough for Jacob and the kids. I'll write you a power of attorney, and you can take it with you. Don't deny yourself anything. Spend it on vacations, salons, pubs. But no men. Go everywhere with your son. Sama told me that you two became friends and bonded. Nodded the girl. Hey, you're not sitting with a baby. It's interesting with him. With him, Topalov has the caress of a husband. He did not let her out of bed, but she only dreamed of Jacob. For the first time, the hunter for men's hearts was tired of physical love. Now she longed for the arms of her lover. Being close to him made her slave happy, and she wished to be with Jacob every minute of her life. Meanwhile, her relationship with him was complicated. He slept with his stepmother, but he only looked at her with lust. There was no love in his eyes. He began to tear himself down. She hired tutors for him. The boy's behavior also became more even. He expressed less to those around him, showed patience and loyalty. Perhaps the reason was their sexual games, which drained his energy. He behaved swaggeringly in the bedroom and could brazenly order himself to incarnate into a nurse or a bank director's hotel maid or a school teacher. The guy seemed to enjoy realizing what influence he had over her, and for some reason he wanted to humiliate the girl. Maybe for the fact that she took from him the last favorite person of his father. All of Clara's pride and independence vanished. She was ready to serve her idol every minute, to fulfill any whims, to be a thing for this handsome, strong guy. She was afraid that one day he would leave her, love her for real, and forget about her. Clara realized that she also had a certain power over the guy, over his body, but she never got hold of the young man's soul, no matter how hard she tried. When she returned home from the colony from her husband's house, there was a surprise waiting for her. Jacob put her things in a bag and put her out the door. The girl's heart almost stopped. She beat helplessly at the door with her fists, but he did not open it. Finally, his head showed through the window. "Why are you banging on the door so hard?" Jacob was mad. She flew to the window and reached for it. "Don't you recognize your car? You don't need it anymore. Let me in the house and we'll talk. You're running away now. You'll get me in bed and you'll be the boss again." "No, I won't." Go back to the Decemberist's husband and he'll be sarcastic to the end. "Is that how you get jealous?" "I'm happy. Who do you want me to share with? Will I share you? Will you share with others?" "Not with my father." The girl figured him out. "That's why you needed me to prove to yourself that you're better." A psychologist came into the bathhouse. "No, you didn't. I don't need you at all. I will live here with a girl young, decent, and gentle. And you're boring. You belong in a whorehouse. I'll broom you out of here. You can't go on without me. You'll ruin the girl's life. Innocence is not your thing. You're just like your father. You just missed him." He confessed. "My little bastard." Clark's eyes filled with tears. "If you command it, I'll do whatever you want. I beg you, open up." There she went again. He closed the window in her face. "I have your father's power of attorney for the money. Without it, you're nothing." Did she yell as loud as she could? "Your blackmail won't work." Jacob's back out on the street. "I'll get by. I'll earn my own money. But leave me alone. Let me breathe clean air. I'm letting you go forever. Live in your father's rented apartment. I don't mind. Just stay away from me." "Jacob, I'll tell my father. He's with you. I don't know what he'll do." She was tearing her hair out of her chest in despair. "Do whatever you want. I don't care, as long as I'm free from your yoke, to live like a normal guy. I don't need your poison of lust anymore." "What are you doing? My boy, how can you do this? I love you more than life. I've torn my soul out. I idolized you. How will you live? My father gave me the money, not you. You're wrong. I've had an account opened for me for a long time. Clara, go away. You've sunk to the bottom of the pile. Is there no one to comfort you but me?" The girl, gritting her teeth, grabbed the bag by the handles and dragged it along the ground. Soon, along with a block of dust, she disappeared behind the gates of the house. Jacob breathed a sigh of relief. He knew that if Clara had come in and touched his body, he would not have been able to resist, would have drowned in debauchery again. She drew him in, she gave him intoxicating pleasure, and he dissolved more and more into her. The guy realized that he would never have a life of his own. As long as she was around, he would not notice reality. Only lust and lust took over his soul. Eventually, he would lose his human form and turn into an insatiable animal. 5 years passed. Marlo sat still, and Jacob never heard from her again. Her father tried to track her down from prison, used his connections, but she disappeared, as if vaporized. True, the money from one of Marlo Sr.'s accounts disappeared with her. Jacob. Now it seemed he was completely free. The boy remembered with horror how the first time he had broken down at the mere thought of Clara. The body bored, and the soul rejected the silent image. In time, all passions began to be forgotten, and he began to live an ordinary life. Having finished school and institute, he got a job. His day invariably began with a cup of Americano. Coffee was available on his desk. When Jacob studied the entries in his diary, today he had several articles to write and process. After all, he had been a correspondent for the popular local magazine, Evening Leitsemansk, for a month now. He took a sip of coffee as the computer dipped burned, the drink invigorating. That's when the phone rang. "Jacob, are you in the newsroom?" He heard the voice of an old acquaintance of Holmes and Miranda's father. Yes, for many years she combined her work as a pathologist and part-time police expert. "Yeah, I was gonna do some work. I've got a story for you. We just brought in a Jane Doe with no ID, no visible injuries on the body. What did she die of? We don't know yet. I'd love to have you on the case. I wish I could charge iPhones for you. ceiling on the anatomical theater. Miranda didn't allow outsiders. But Jacob was allowed. For one thing, she had a long and hopeless crush on Marlowe Sr. in the second place. She liked the boy's articles. They were truthful, based on facts without the slightest tendency toward jaundice. Jacob, of course, marveled at how one could maintain loyalty and feelings for his father for so many years. And it was also a mystery to him why the man had earned such loyalty and love. You couldn't find a woman like Holmes by daylight. Jacob cast an interested glance at her aged but well-groomed, not beautiful, a redhead with a scattering of freckles on her cheeks, short boyish haircut, a shrewd look in her blue eyes, thin as a birch, and most importantly strong, determined. In general, involuntarily, in addition to respect, there is sympathy. Miranda, did the body of the sheet return at this moment? Or have I forgotten everything in the world? Dark, smooth hair, eyebrows like seagulls in flight, beautiful lips, straight, precise nose, perfect, swarthy body. There was no doubt in his mind that he was looking at the woman in front of him. "You're not well, Jacob." The pathologist got worried. Looking at the defeated guy, very much he could not hold back. Tears spurted from his eyes. Jacob stepped out into the dark corridor and leaned against the cold wall. Soon his father would be coming out. One must try to pull himself together and find out what had happened to his wife. He never filed for divorce. He kept hoping she'd come forward to tell him about their affair, or hide it, which was better. Jacob took the pictures of the car. He said goodbye to Miranda and went to the police station, hoping to find out something about her recent life. Went straight to the office of his close friend, James Jackson, but he had not yet received any information from the Ministry of Internal Affairs database about the girl or her photos. Jacob showed all the photos to his buddy. Wow, what a sultry beauty. In her lifetime, right? Twirled it like she wanted to. When he whistled, he twirled. Through gritted teeth, said Jacob, "You know her." "I used to. I'll tell you sometime. It's a long and murky story." They spent hours enlarging the pictures to get a better look, but they saw no signs of violence. That's what James said. "We're not going to see anything on these pictures. She died accidentally. Assault or accidental. She didn't put up a fight. No scratches, no bruising on the body. Dress is intact. What happened to you? Girl? Expensive clothes, fancy manicure, well-groomed hair. What a grief for her loved ones. And she has no one but her husband." Jacob sighed. He's been looking for her for years. Found her. There. Who's the husband? Tell me, what's darker? Father, really. But why didn't you say anything? Yeah, our people were talking about this case, that he was wanted from prison. They found it when he was with her. I guess I wasn't in the suit. Yeah, that's right. You told me once that he got married. How am I gonna tell him now? I'm not gonna tell him anything. He's in poor health as it is. I thought he'd be strong and strong forever. Maybe he would have been if she hadn't disappeared. Did he give up after hearing that? Well, he still has to be officially notified. So there you go. And say, James, when he's home for 5 days, there's no ID on her. And we know the girl is Sarah Marlowe. Only then I didn't put my testimony into evidence. And there, while the investigation is going on, the father will be released. Okay, Jackson agreed. Have it your way. We need to know where she came into town from, where she was, why she came back, and why she died. Go ahead, get that information and bring it to me in a kiwi beak, and look for any witnesses who saw her alive. Jacob couldn't sleep at night. He remembered his and Clara's stormy past. He got out of bed, went to the kitchen, poured himself a glass of wine, then sat down to look at the pictures in his laptop, where he transferred them from his iPhone. Zoomed in on their makeup. The victim had a brightly colored evening outfit. Apparently was going somewhere new. Did she make it? We need to hit the restaurants. Hit an underground casino. No sign of a struggle anywhere. Blissful smile on his face. I don't think he's ever been high before. But who knows? She had a passionate, uncontrollable nature. He was awakened in the morning by a call from Miranda Holmes. "Put me to sleep. I'm not bleeding," she blurted out angrily as the blood was turned off. Even if she'd woken up, there was no chance of survival. An egregious case in my experience. What do the police know about the girl? Nothing. And no leads. Oh, by the way, was she raped? No. I'm going out tonight to look for information. My guess is she spent the evening or night out in public somewhere. She's dressed festively. Yeah, according to her stomach contents, she had a big meal somewhere before she died. And she's got foreign blood on her shoe heels. I'm typing. Jacob had breakfast, jumped on a streetcar, and in half an hour was in the editorial office. Ask off the chief to intrigue with the prospect of sensational news. "Jacob, you're getting into trouble again. You haven't had your snouts cleaned enough lately," Joe ranted. A burly bearded man with round glasses, smiling at the boy. "You like stories, don't you? If it wasn't for Jackson's support and help, you'd be in the hospital with fractures." Joe back then was not an intellectually challenged gangster. And that exsanguinated girl, that's a crime unheard of around here. Out of the ordinary, so to speak. She didn't have her purse, though. Maybe it was theft. But then why kill so brutally? The killer wasn't interested in sex with the victim. "It's going to take me a long time to get to the bottom of this and help the police. Please don't distract me with your phone calls. Pass my pile on to someone else, whatever it is." The material looks unusual. Most importantly, knowing the tenacity of Marlowe Jr., in response only waved his hand, say, "Go ahead, go for it. Good luck." For 5 days, there was no word from the boy. At that time, his father returned from the colony. The man was unrecognizable. "Got old and lost weight and called my son, but he wouldn't pick up." Good as usual. The spare key was on the shelf in the shed. John entered the house and made his way into the kitchen. There was a laptop computer on the table. There was a slit extending from it to the mains. "Where did you go in such a hurry, son?" He left the tech on. He sat down across from it and opened the lid, and the faucet glowed. Marlowe wrinkled his nose at the picture of the dead girl, wanted to slam the computer shut. Suddenly, his heart throbbed. He took a closer look at the picture and realized who was in front of him, and was literally dumbfounded. He wheezed and fell to the floor. John Marlowe woke up in his bedroom. Not usual were the aromas of clean linen and the freshness of roasted coffee beans. His son sat beside him. "How are you, Dad?" he asked thoughtfully, adjusting the blanket. "I'm all right. I've come down. Clara died." "Yeah, I found out by accident when Holmes called me over. Thought I'd see a stranger. And then this happened. She was murdered. Why? I wish I'd known. But Daddy's still here. You rest and recuperate. You shouldn't be worried." "Oh, son, I lived only in the hope that I would find her and see her." And now Jacob's heart ached with pity, looking at his grief-stricken father. How could I tell him everything? Now he would kill them with his own hands. Let this secret never be revealed. No, and I'll keep silent. What does it matter now? We'll find the father of the murderers, believe me. "All right, son, I'll live while I wait," the man said. Falling asleep, Jacob went to shower without appetite, swallowed a sandwich, and froze at the kitchen table in one pose, all pondering the results of his investigation. The state of mind was devastated. The story was too personal. There were too many white spots in it. He used to be interested in racy crime stories. Now a young woman who loved him had been murdered. Grief shattered his father. The secrets of their relationship darkened his soul. Jacob perked up. "It is necessary to call the editorial office. Joe has news, but please allow me to rest today. I'm at my limit. Have you been traveling?" The guy sighed heavily, walked to his room, and collapsed on his bed. He didn't wake up until sunset. He dialed Jackson. He's been collecting information on Clark, too. A lot of it matched. Turns out, right after she broke up with Jacob, she went to the countryside. She had a fake passport and soaked in lies. Life was the governor's mistress for a long time. The retired general's kept woman met with high-ranking bureaucrats. Jacob had visited the places where the girl had lately lived, and he was lying when he told his father he would find the killers. He'd already found the culprit. Only a few days ago, he had been sitting in a railroad car, amazed at what he had learned. Having stayed in the small Volga town for a very short time, he discovered not only the motives of the crime committed, but also looked into the eyes of the person who hated him. It was a woman. Of course, for men were favored voluptuously. Perhaps some would like to put her in her place for her willfulness and rebelliousness. But to kill still at the train station. Jacob learned that she had traveled to Minsk on false documents. The investigation was helped by photos of the girl, which Jacob had kept from the time of their close acquaintance. Curly, lush, white blonde gladly told him that a local famous courtesan had bought a ticket from her. Only, she said, it was Lisa. Everyone here knew her. Cavaliers came to see the young woman from all over the region. As soon as an expensive foreign car drove off down the streets, everyone knew in which yard she'd stop. Lisa rented a comfortable private house in the town with a well-maintained yard and modern renovation. She never liked to do housework, so she had a housekeeper. Jacob found her on a neighboring street. The thin woman of about 50 years old with traces of former beauty on her face told him that, according to her information, Lisa had gone to the city to her old friend. To his delight, she told him her first and last name. Jacob shuddered. The name Kelly Dean had often been on Clara's tongue when they lived with her, the girl spending evenings at FGC hotspots. That classmate of hers had said, "Oh, right. I have her number on my cell phone." Without hesitation, Marlowe Jr. dialed it. Kelly picked up the phone and was immediately behind the hall. "How long it's been since she's heard from him. I went to the sea," she praised herself. "She's doing well on her own." "Yes, alone. She didn't want to come with me." "So you met in town recently?" "Yes, we met the night before I left. We went to a bar. We had a great time, like when we were young. She never stopped loving you. She kept asking me if I knew anything." "I see. Well, I'll call you if you need anything." "Okay, I'm on the phone. But let me ask you what you're calling for. And you're looking for a connection like old love never fades. You want to find her." "No, I'll explain it all some other time." "Later means never." "Sad," sighed Kelly. "I know you guys, and you're still living in the same place. Or did you move somewhere else? But none of the handsome like you did not ask to marry. I'm still with my parents. Shall we get together?" "I'll be back in 2 days. I'll think about it. I'll call you." "Bye, Kelly." After this conversation, Jacob decided to have a conversation with Dean's parents. They were extremely surprised by his question about their daughter and her friendship with Clara, although they were happy to be contacted by the correspondent of the local newspaper. Jacob showed them his identification. They calmly told him that the daughter was now vacationing on the Black Sea coast, about the fact that they began to communicate with Slaga in kindergarten and then at school. Slaga, because the mother abandoned, ran away from her husband with another. He brought her daughter up to speed, and she finished school with his support and died. And then in school and after. Girlfriends never parted. They were together all the time. It was only 5 years ago that their paths diverged a bit. Clara moved away, and Kelly saw her less often, and then stopped talking about her friend altogether. Kelly and Jacob thought they'd had a fight, something they hadn't shared. Jacob didn't tell them about Clark's death, just asked about mutual friends and took their contacts. It was so strange to dig into the past of a woman who had almost consumed him with her insane lust for passion. Turns out, she was also a head-turner in school and excelled in her studies. Hunting for the stronger sex Clara began in her walls. It was clear because the men who told about her immediately chewed face, eyes lit up and palms covered from the guys. It's been years, and she still excites them. Though how long has it been since I myself got rid of the vicious attraction? The more people Jacob interviewed, the more obvious it became that Clara and Kelly really were, As they say, inseparable. People were sure to characterize their friendship. It was a strange relationship, a classmate said. A full-figured red-headed girl strolling through the park with a stroller. Jacob was curious what she meant. Why did you have that opinion? But she's always been a favorite, a leader. And in junior high, she had girlfriends who obeyed her. And then Kelly outshone everyone else. She's always seemed like the difficult one. Quiet, but she'd get her way. So she sang along to Clara's line. And soon she became an indispensable friend. Like she fought off everyone. Dispelled all those who were with her. She didn't tolerate competition. She was arrogant and proud and with us. And everyone liked Slaga. She was outgoing and generous. We all thought that after school they'd split up because it was incomprehensible how such different girls could be friends for so many years. But Dean wouldn't let Clara out of her clutches. Do you think she wanted a lasting relationship with Clara? It's hard to know. She's a very shady lady. Jacob was the last one to interview Zhenka in Vasilkiv. According to the information he had gathered, he had previously been madly in love with Kelly. Jacob looked with interest at the man who was able to resist Slaga and chose her friend. They met near the city administration office. Jacob was approached by a short, stocky man. He shook his hand firmly. Why do you ask about them? Rick wondered, talking about how he perceived the girls' friendship in his school days. He scratched the back of his head as he saw them together in Minsk. Self-waste not shutting up. They didn't even notice me, even though I was passing close by. I thought about it, but wow, I haven't had feelings for Kelly for a long time. I've forgiven her. It's all in the past for me. And they still have a strong friendship. Forgiven for what? Jacob's on the rebound. So she wouldn't let Kelly go out with me. So she lied to me. Told her we slept together, and I told her I loved her. When in fact, we didn't. Tell me, Rick, why didn't it happen? Because Clara is very beautiful. Men were crazy about her. She's just not my type. I don't like a predator, smiled the young man. I see. But thank you for the information and assessment of those long ago events. So, can you tell me what happened? Someone killed Clark. By the looks of it, one of our own. That's terrible. Of course, Rick's got his hands full. She was a bitch, but she didn't deserve to die. Yeah, hardly anyone would kill her for manipulating other people's feelings. You'd have to really hate her. I haven't come across one yet, Jacob reasoned. But it's a good thing I didn't kill her myself. He thought. Yeah, she seemed to have more sympathy in class than Kelly. They disliked her, forgave her a lot, but only because she was a favorite of Clark's. She even complained to me once that she was fed up with the role and wanted to step out of her friend's shadow. But then we had a conflict, and I do not know about the further development of events. Jacob was suddenly disturbed by this information. Kelly had not given him the impression of a loyal friend before, despite the fact that he had seen her several times. Intuition told the guy that behind the innocent appearance of the girl hides not noble motives. He decided for himself that he would meet her at the station and digest her. Jacob personally called her back and played the interested in a date bow. To his surprise, Dean came completely enthralled. I blatantly started toward him. Where are we going to go with you afterward? Will you rent a hotel? More like of a girl on the phone. Do not chase horses. We need everything in order. First, I'll feed you at the restaurant. Then I'll take you to bed. What do you say? Agreed. Jacob shared his plan with them alive. They met in the evening in the city park. Let me back you up, James suggested. If she's the killer, nothing can stop her. Make sure she doesn't feed you to us. Criminals rarely change their MO. A girl might realize you suspect her, and Kelly's openness to intimacy could be a trap. I'll get a room near you. I'll introduce my operatives to you. James, it's unnecessary that I can't handle the girl. Trust me, Jacob. In the criminal underworld, a lot of people put on the guise of decency and appear weak. In reality, they're usually unscrupulous and ruthless. Well, agreed with Comrade Marlowe Jr., having agreed the guys left Jacob to the hotel and the police to the police station. He still had to study a lot of information on the case to formalize it properly. A day later, Jackson revealed to Jacob the new facts that his colleagues had dug up at Dean's place of residence. Jacob had no sooner finished his morning coffee in the hotel restaurant than the name James popped up on his iPhone. Jacob, I was right. These are the circumstances. Anyway, at the hospital where our suspect works, 6 young women OD'd in a month on her shift. Blamed it on them, like they weren't following doctor's orders. The victims were being treated for hypertension. Where'd they get it? Oh, in this day and age, diseases are getting younger. What's your diet? Yeah, and stress isn't exactly a rash. The pace of life. So why would she take their lives? What's her motive? I don't know that yet. And that evening, Jacob's phone was ringing off the hook. They were Kelly's attacks. Jacob, I want to go straight to my room. Will you get out of the way, get dressed up, or should I go to yours? Mine. He pretended to give up. The train arrived on schedule. Kelly jumped out of it happy and cheerful. She gave Marlowe a big hug and handed him her bag. Oh, it was so hot in the car, Dean shared. All night long my eyes stayed shut. She looked adoringly at the guy, flapping her long eyelashes. It seemed before him a naive and pure girl. Her gentle gaze, pure blonde hair, clear, blue eyes, open smile, confused Jacob. What kind of conniving killer is she? Cunning in her own mind. Maybe, but she's not smart. She goes wherever she wants, like a chicken. He put his arm around the girl's fragile shoulders. Now you're sleeping all chilly in the room. There Kelly took a shower, changed her clothes, tidied up, and only then went down to the restaurant with Jacob. James was nearby. After receiving a text message from Marlowe Jr., he broke into the room. There was a gym bag on the floor. Things were scattered on the bed. His keen eyes stopped on a very expensive purse. What was on the nightstand? It was impossible to buy one on a nurse's salary. James carefully opened it and examined the contents. He found a vial of Jacob coffee. Well, of course, although it doesn't mean anything yet. Meanwhile, Jacob was looking intently at his companion. Yes, Clara, she was certainly far away. But she was not unattractive. Short in stature, blonde, and pretty. He cast a glance at her slender calves and saw in the ankle area behind the living. But apparently a recent scar. It was still pink, healed a few days ago. Noticing his gaze, Kelly tucked her legs under the table. Why are you hiding your pretty legs from me? If you're going to give yourself away, Jacob is going to give himself to me. Oh, that's me. I had a friend who was too pretty, and everyone paid attention to her exclusively. That's why I still have a complex. Jacob flashed in my head. Though I learned to love myself, the girl continued. Didn't Clara call you while you were at sea? No, but she's probably in her little town there. Did it ever occur to you to ask how your friend was doing? Oh, come on, Jacob. Like you don't know how stiff she is. She only communicates when she wants to. I'm used to it, and I don't take any unnecessary steps in that direction. Well, I knew you weren't interested in me, but in your ex-girlfriend. The girl was starting to get angry. Jacob filled his glass with champagne and interestedly looked at Kelly, jealous. You're wrong. It's been over with her for a long time. You can't live a human life with someone like her. You become a slave. How sad is your voice and your look now? Dean stated. You loved her after all. I was sick of her, answered the boy. That's more accurate. It's not love, it's an addiction. Let's get on with the summer and the food. He nodded at the waiter who brought the hot food. You'll still need your strength at night. He winked at the girl. After dinner, the couple returned to the room. Jacob skillfully portrayed passion, fiercely possessed Kelly. After the intimacy, the girl completely melted. She did not live in his arms and smiled blissfully. I've never had such a thing. You are an exceptional lover, quietly whispered she. I can be. Jacob grinned to himself. But that's one of those things. You can't praise yourself. No one will. But Kelly could use a lesson from her friend. How to get men. Totally mediocre woman. But she's achieved her goal. Mademoiselle. Relaxed and unsuspecting. Indeed, she gave the impression of a carefree and happy girl's woman. Therefore, the appearance on the doorstep of James with an ID card in his hands was a complete surprise to her. He directly asked where your friend Clara, with whom you had lunch together. June 16, 2000 at the Oasis restaurant. And where were you at 20:30 when she was killed? Whose purse did you have? Jacob joined the interrogation. Can you tell me how you got the wound on your foot? Did you unhook your shoe? Guys, I don't understand what's going on. Kelly, on what grounds are you asking me? I was with my friend at a restaurant. So what? Were you the last person to see her alive? And then she died. Jackson wouldn't stop. Oh, but I didn't even know that. Kelly theatrically flailed her arms. I saw her alive, healthy. Jacob walked over to the table and took his purse from it. He went to the bank, risking being made a fool of. Clara came to see me this afternoon with that purse, and it belongs to her. After saying that, Kelly expelled and started throwing her things and anything else she could get her hands on at the guys. But James and Jacob quickly coped with unmasked John Jackson, properly charged her with murder, told her to change her clothes, take with her the necessities of life, and took her out in handcuffs to the street. There she got into a police car and immediately tried them on. She did not scream anymore, only looked angrily at everyone around her. Further interrogations of the girl showed that the friendship was trouble for her. Kelly had always been possessed by an all-consuming envy and jealousy, so her friend had accepted death from this feeling. Dean's confession was frightful. Jackson allowed a friend to be present, and he heard the whole story in its entirety. As soon as I saw Clara in our class, I immediately hated her. She didn't have to do anything to get attention. She was the center of attention. The guys and male teachers loved her, and the girls loved her. She was always generous and easy to talk to. Yes, she was an idol. Everyone admired her, imitated her manner of speaking, dressing, moving. Only no one succeeded. Only she had naturally inimitable animal magnetism, as simply attracted to her, and that was the only thing that pissed me off too. I resisted as much as I could. I wanted to be better than her and more interesting to others. Only time showed that she was the one who had all the sympathy, the fancy clothes, the endless male attention. She'd give me something from her closet. I took it. How did it piss me off? Taking her socks, settling for the men she dumped. Was that fair? And in high school, she had a fight with me and Jenka, the only guy who chose me over her, but she didn't want him. He wasn't her kind of guy, and he wasn't interested in her, so she still couldn't let me be happy for a while. I am Clara. She turned to Jacob the devil. It was important to her to possess everyone around her, and the only way to stop it was to wipe her off the face of the earth. All I did was wait for the moment of vengeance, and it came. I persuaded her to go to the seaside together, but before we went to a restaurant. She had a nice hotel in town. I was in a humble motel, and then it was just a matter of technique. I spiked her coffee, man. And as we were walking back through the wasteland, she felt sick, realizing she didn't have long to live. I revealed to her the true reasons for her behavior somehow weakened, and she managed to stab me in the leg with her heel. But then, as she passed out, I pulled the plastic system from my bag and pumped it out of her body. The blood quickly covered her with cardboard boxes, took my purse, and went traveling. I deserved it. There was plenty of money in Marienka's purse, enough for me and for clothes, and for a delicious meal, and for rented accommodation at sea. Tell me, my dear, why did you kill so many women in the hospital? James asked. I heard them talking about how happy and well off their lives were. I was jealous. I was also conducting an experiment. What dose to give in Marienka? Nobody suspected me there at all. Kelly Dean was smiling in court. It's not that much. 15 years for sweet revenge for a hated friend. Jacob wrote an interesting article and got a commendation from the editor-in-chief. He detailed the whole story to his father, clarifying his and Clara's past. Gradually, Marlowe Sr. began to recover, and Miranda Holmes visited him. Life fell into its own rut, and the Marlowe story was gradually forgotten. Calmness and dimensionality seemed to have entered their lives. But this was a deceptive impression. One day, Jacob had to go on a business trip, and his bus was involved in an accident. He woke up to the touch of hot hands stroking his face. He opened his eyes, but there was no way to see the man's face. Instead, there was a thick haze and a worried female voice. It obviously belonged to a young nurse. "Thank God. You're finally awake. That's good. Now maybe you'll tell me your name. At least I'm questioning you. I'm gonna go get the doctor." Jacob tried to comprehend what was happening. "The doctors came to my senses. I'm in a hospital. Why is there no picture of my last memory? My eyes hurt. I can't see anything. Where am I? Look, Jack, our John Doe is finally awake. Well, that's good to know. Driving all the way out here with no ID must have been in a hurry. He's a fighter, so he'll live on. Am I right? Sick, can you hear me? What's your name?" Jacob took a deep breath, and his chest was crushed by pain. Tried to open his eyes, which were dark, so he whispered. Weakened his voice. "Jacob, I'm Marlowe." "Jacob, you mean? And where you live, do you remember?" The boy strained his memory, but he couldn't remember anything about himself. A blank slate. Feels like he just started living today, and mumbled, "I don't know. I feel pain. Can't see out of my eyes." In such a helpless position, Jacob stayed in the hospital for more than 3 weeks. In contrast to his memory, his eyesight began to gradually recover as his physical well-being improved and his body regained its strength. Despite the fact that the doctors quickly found out who he was and where he came from, he himself could not recover the former pictures of his life. James and his father came to visit him and talked about what he had been like as a young boy. But Jacob only shrugged his shoulders. His mind was empty. The doctor's explanation was that after the accident he had retrogrades, amnesia, and a condition. Oblivion could last a long time. Jacob had problems not only with his vision, but also with his musculoskeletal system. Multiple fractures meant he could only walk with a cane. His father took him home, and there Jacob was mortally bored with what to do. With his mind, he would do everything, but his body was limited in movement. His own existence seemed meaningless to him. He looked at old photographs, listened to the stories of his father and friends, but the memory was like a thick fog. Some vague images and outlines disturbed him at night, but there was no clarity in them. Day and night he began to read everything that came under his hand: magazines, newspapers, books, tried to find something familiar in the professions, literature and art, but no signs of identification with anything I could not identify with. And suddenly I began to write stories, essays. Words literally poured out of his soul. Thus were born his novels in the genre of fiction. True, only his father and his girlfriend Miranda read them. On one such evening, Jacob met one on the street. He was older. He'd been living without a past for 5 years. Never remembered himself before the trauma. Talked to him. His wise musings on life were close to the guy. He even experienced a faint hope that the images of his former life would return likeness again. Pleasant communication brought the men closer together. And during the next meeting they told each other about themselves. Some raiders in broad daylight beat a new acquaintance, Marlowe Jr., took away his lodging, shoved some money and a one-way ticket, threatening not to tell anyone about the incident. If he wants to live, of course. That's how he ended up in Minsk. As long as he had money, he lived in hotels and ate in canteens. When the money ran out, he found a modest place to live and got a job as a janitor in the same neighborhood. Fate ordered so that both became lonely, unnecessary to society. Reading and a common view of many things asked him. One early morning, Jacob came out to him in the yard. A friend waved to him. He was deftly handling the Christmas tree. It was already warm, for it was a hot summer. Marlowe sat down on a bench, waiting for his friend to come to him. Suddenly, he heard a sound like a cat flickering or a baby crying. Thought he heard it. Turned around behind him near the trash can. Saw the baby carelessly tangled in Baykov's blanket. He quickly jumped up, picked up the blanket from the ground, and holding it to himself, ran to the hospital. It was difficult to breathe and walk. Injuries were still making themselves felt, but he went forward fiercely. After all, it is necessary to have time to save the baby's life. Was the mother's heart indifferent at the moment when she abandoned her child? Even animals do not do that to their offspring. Ran to the nearest department, took the baby immediately to the children's hospital. They were surprised that the lame Jacob so quickly overcame more than 2 kilometers. Returning home, the boy told his father and his buddy about the unexpected find. Marlowe Sr., at the request of his son, found out where the baby had been sent. It turned out that he saved the girl. She was treated at the Central Hospital. Jacob was very worried about her health, and with the help of James Jackson, who issued him a certificate of freelance police officer, was able to freely visit the rescued child. The head of the ward favored their meetings. When she learned that he was the one who had picked up the girl, she asked him, "What would you like to call her in life?" Sort of like godfather to her, "Now you come for Jenna." The name was pleasant to his realization. "It's a good name," the woman agreed. "That's how we'll do it." The foundling case went straight to Jackson's desk. He searched for the girl's mother, found her in the hospital. The story she told him was egregious, but her deed was not justified either morally or legally. At the hospital, James immediately sought out the doctor who had treated the young woman. "Well, my dove," my doctor looked at Jack with tired but kind eyes. "I can tell you it's almost a miracle, the beating, multiple concussions, but there's no irreparable consequence. The girl is strong and on the mend. Well, she didn't get hit in the stomach, so she gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She was moved to a comfortable 1-bedroom today. You're free to question her." "Thank you, doctor." "Thank James. What's the room number?" 33. The doctor answered. "Thank you too." He squinted a little. "Maybe you can get along with her. She says she can't remember anything. But as a doctor, I can see there's nothing wrong with her memory. There are other motives for this silence. We should punish such a thing and not let it go unpunished." Before entering the girl's room, James staggered a little to the door. He didn't even want to talk to her, but he knocked. He heard a slightly hoarse knock in response. "Come in." The young woman looked bad in the light of day, but he could tell that she was pleasant looking. Despite the large bruises on her face, Jack realized that in good health she was quite good looking. Her appearance could not be called standard. She possessed a natural soft beauty. On the graceful face of the girl, as 2 stars shone, large cornflower-colored eyes framed by thick eyelashes on her cheeks' dimples, and thick blonde hair slightly waved. "Hello, I'm an investigator. I'll be handling your case. Tell me how you were able to leave your daughter." "I don't remember." The girl mumbled, embarrassed. "It's all very curious. But what is your name? Do you remember?" "Camille." "Camille." The girl blurted out and turned her back to the wall. James asked her a lot of questions, but she stubbornly maintained that she did not remember the events of the accident, without ever finding out anything. The policeman slammed the door irritably and left the room. But Jackson's stubbornness was to be envied. He was eager to see open cases through to the end. A couple of days later, he returned and confronted the young woman. In fact, she only wanted to forget forever her entire personal history that had led to such a violent denouement, starting from the moment she had first seen Stephen, her future husband. Their acquaintance had been very pleasant at first. He wooed beautifully, was caringly polite and responsive to any request of the girl. Camille grew up in a boarding school and did not remember her parents at all. And that's why she went to work right after graduation. She and Stephen worked in the same chain store and constantly communicated as colleagues. Camille was a novice specialist, and he on his own initiative immediately took patronage over her, helping her with advice and guidance. They became close on one of the corporate holidays, when they escaped together from a long but boring banquet. That same night, Stephen kissed her while walking her home. He courted like a real gentleman, was very bland and witty, gave small but nice gifts and flowers without occasion. Before Camille had time to remember, she found herself with him in the registry office. And as soon as she became his wife, good, in their relationship ended. First of all, her husband forbade her to work. Then he audited her closet, threw out some of it. In the trash went short skirts and blouses with frank cleavage, fishnet lingerie, jewelry, and even cosmetics. Then Stephen began to disappear nights and waste money in the casino. His wife he did not allow to go to the nearest store, kept locked up, locked the apartment on the key, going to work or to a nightclub. He made scandals if she painted her lips without his permission, tore her underwear, and threw things off the balcony. Unfounded, accusing the spouse of lewd behavior. The man constantly humiliated his wife, tried to hurt with a word, reproached with a piece of bread. At the moment, when under the violent and mentally outbursts of his wife, Camille decided to leave her husband, she realized with horror that she was pregnant by him. The day she told her husband this, he beat her for the first time, deciding that the child was not his. Then the beatings became regular and more prolonged. Saving her unborn child, the young woman managed to escape through the back door of the women's clinic during a routine appointment to which Stephen accompanied her. She had her papers and some personal savings. A few days later, her husband found her at a close friend's apartment on the internet, beat her severely, forced her into a car, and drove her into the woods. At first, he probably wanted to burn her, as he doused her with gasoline, but then he just hit her over the head with a weighty board and threw her. There she heard her husband cursing her and wishing her death. Gathering her last strength, she took several days to get out of the forest slum. How had she managed it? She did not know, ragged, hungry, beaten, and yet she didn't file a complaint against her husband. After the hospital, they wandered among acquaintances. Her husband wasn't looking for her anymore. He thought she died in the woods. Camille realized that if he found out that she was alive, sooner or later he would track her down and beat her to death. She was afraid for both herself and the child, so she decided to keep it a secret until she gave birth. Afterward, she dropped the baby off where Jacob found it. Jackson silently recorded her statement. "Don't you want your daughter back?" he asked. "No," the woman cried. She refused to give her up on the grounds that her husband would kill the baby girl with her. James instituted criminal proceedings against both of them. They were convicted and sent to a penal colony. Both spouses died there under unclear circumstances. The girl was left an orphan while her parents were still alive. Only Jacob could not leave an infirm child. He was attached to the girl with all his soul and knew a lot about her himself. How much she eats, how she sleeps, when she cries. When the baby got stronger, she was transferred to the baby house. He got a job there as a watchman for 6 months and stayed there near his eyelash. The girl grew before his eyes when she began to make the first steps. The guy began to seek permission for adoption, returned to the editorial office of Pravda, started there everything literally from scratch. But he got the job done in a matter of months. He rebuilt his reputation as a top journalist. Life had given Jacob a gift. Though he had lost his memory, he was now a father. He was given a little girl to raise. He became her legal guardian. A daughter became an important goal. The father helped raise her, and he was thrilled with his granddaughter. He found faith in himself too. He settled down. Raising a baby girl, 2 men, was not easy, but they put in it all the love and tenderness on which only were capable. Grew up with her from diapers to school. They truly loved Jenna with that unconditional incommensurability and love that elevates a person above the ordinary. Their hearts were filled with unselfishness and pure thoughts. The little girl was able to give them true happiness, except that there was no mistress in the Marlowe house, and when it seemed hope was completely gone, fate gave Jacob another chance for personal prosperity. beautiful, statuesque. Accurately honest red-haired girl sat in the carriage of a fast train and leisurely drank hot sweet tea, to the rhythmic clatter of the wheels. In Jenna's memory flashed pictures of the recent past. The bustling capital city, its noisy highways and bright night lights were left behind. Her soul was longing for the long-awaited meeting with her native land, cozy home, and caring mother. She lay down. Drama quickly piled up and enveloped the girl's consciousness, and she instantly fell into a deep sleep. She awoke to the unceremonious shouting of the conductor. "Citizens, passengers, wake up. The train is arriving at Minsk Station. Standing time is 3 minutes." Jenna, fearing the unpleasant stupor caused by sleep, and quickly packed her things in a sports bag. Outside the window flashed cityscapes and the train was beginning to break. Jenna stepped out of the carriage in the late afternoon, although it was still daylight. The station was empty. Only someone's face flashed in the window of the station and immediately disappeared. The girl took offense and sighed. How long had it been since she had been in Minsk? Moved on the way home. She went back to the past, to her childhood and youth. She remembered how she jumped on the sleepers and got a reprimand from her mother for such behavior. But this did not stop the girl and ride on the platform together with her friend Jenna Drusels and played classics. True, the station duty officer dispersed them, explaining that it was dangerous. But the bench with a comfortable backrest is special, wonderful, memorable. How many girls whose secrets she knows? Jenna took a seat. Her hand gently stroked the roughness of time, the planks. Here was the inscription preserved. Jenna plus Jacob. James had done it. He was in love with her, and she sympathized with Lech too. Now James was not the last person in Minsk. She read Jacob's article about his investigation of a terrible crime in the city, and it was committed by a girl out for revenge. What kind of terrible, soul-crushing feelings are there? Jenna's been friends with Jacob since she was 5. Ran into their house, and the boy's father was serving another sentence. Jenna still doesn't remember him now. She saw him a couple times when he came home from prison. But then all Jacob's friends were asked to go home, and Grandma Valia cried, wiping her face with her apron and kissing her son on the top of his head. Then all together again. Lazar Paraski and the apple trees in their orchard. They played both hide and seek and catch up. Often James would join them. He was a terrible thug and a brawler when he was a kid. We used to go to school together over a small climb. It wasn't scary. After school, we'd walk on the playground, throwing their briefcases in a pile. Her father would take them for a motorcycle ride on a summer evening, if the mood struck him. Jenna thought that even now she felt the track and pressed James against it with every fiber of her soul and cell of her body, as she had once done in the cradle of that motorcycle. Jacob was good. He was the tallest, sitting in the saddle behind his father. Jenna liked school. She was good at math, physics, chemistry, but she was especially excited to learn the basics of biology. She easily grasped the laws of development of living nature, in awe of learning about the unique processes that trigger the mechanisms of life at the cellular level. She liked to learn the physiology and anatomy of the human body, so she wanted to become a doctor at the age of 10. And in her youth, after reading Mikhail Bulgakov's novel Notes of a Young Doctor, the girl was finally confirmed in her desire. Despite the fact that Jenna had few illnesses and practically did not encounter doctors. As a child, the atmosphere described in the books was internally close to her. Already as a girl, she was ready for responsibility for someone else's life and health, treated all abandoned cats and dogs. She was interested in learning all the subtleties of this craft. And one more incident from her own life pushed her to choose her future profession. One day, she cut herself and a pustule appeared on her leg. Her mother took her to consult a surgeon. He, of course, prescribed treatment and dressings, and the girl often had to visit the children's polyclinic. She liked everything: their cleanliness, medicinal odor, white coats, and friendly nurses. After already in high school, the same surgeon came to their classes and told about his profession, After his speech, the desire to give themselves to this craft only strengthened. Perhaps it was the finger of fate, because even now she did not regret the decision that she chose the path of a doctor, but she really wanted to devote herself to children. Therefore, after the third course, she went into pediatrics, and when practice began on duty in the hospital, the girl realized that she had chosen a profession to her liking. She had very good supervisors who discerned in her the future luminaries of pediatrics. This, of course, was presented by them as irony. But Jenna had indeed fallen into the hands of a unique specialist. Her mentor was a thoughtful doctor, teaching her to reason, analyze disease symptomatology, and think clinically, to see nuances in practice that textbooks didn't talk about. That's why Jenna Smith was drawn to this hospital. She was trusted there. It was as if she had already established herself as a boarding doctor. Already after she received her medical degree, the girl worked in the profile. Especially, she liked those days when the venerable doctors went on vacation and duty became independent. Then immediately felt the increased responsibility. After all, under all the documents was not the name of the mentor, but her own. In general, she had no regrets about her choice. Professionally, she was growing, gaining experience, and was satisfied with everything. But her personal life did not work out. No, there were plenty of suitors, but only her heart was long occupied. Jenna's memories were interrupted. Her mom ran towards her across the tracks, worried and aged. "Jenna, what are you doing? I'm meeting you on the platform and you're not here." "Don't worry, I raided the memorials. You said you couldn't make it." The girl rushed to hug her. "Yes, my employee didn't show up. No way we're gonna do this. A hole in the fence to close." Vasilchikov, taking her mother under her arm, Jenna smiled broadly. "Even though she's changed, she still smells just as delicious. Herbs and milk. Mum's house is quiet all around, not that in a frenzied, ignoring Shield's priceless joys of life. Everyone's flying somewhere, all dazed. Their faces are stamped with universal importance, and in their eyes indifference to their neighbors. What can you do? The rhythm of the capital. At home, everything was as before. The same curtains, perfect cleanliness, the smell of freshly cooked fresh soup. Everything was the same. And what could change? As if hearing her daughter's thoughts, Cindy answers, "There's only no man in the house. It's hard to manage alone. But I don't need anyone after your father. You'll get some rest and we'll go and see him off. I've tidied up the grave. Mom and Aunt Rick Jackson. They live on Zareknaya Street. Where will they go? Everything suits them. The capital doesn't beckon with its lights. We pensioners have our own life. Gardens, orchards, and in the center there are houses like Marlowe's." "Here they are with excitement?" asked Jenna. "Yes," the woman sighed, covering her mouth with her hand. Jenna looked at her mother's changed face. "What is it, James?" Also in the newsroom, John left the past. He works as a caretaker at the orphanage. That's where James worked, while the girl he rescued was being cared for. "What girl?" "Oh, Jenna. Everyone here knows the story. I didn't tell you. You were so fond of him when you were young, and when he got a stepmother in the house, he forgot all about you. Somehow I got out of it. I knew then that we were no match for them. I guess she forbade him to be around you." "Really?" Jenna was surprised. "Not married," Cindy hastened to add. "After the accident, he lost his memory. He doesn't remember anything." Tears came to Jenna's eyes. How could it be? Why would a guy do such a thing? After such a message, the girl barely touched her mother's literate things, ate hastily and without appetite. She wanted to be alone. It was too sad news she had learned. Jenna got up from the table. "Thank you, Mom. Don't look for it. It's a culinary masterpiece. That you barely moved to this masterpiece." The girl's mother sighed. "I've been so excited about so many things. I'm going to walk to our school." Go, Jenna. Maybe your heart will calm down at home." As soon as the door shut behind her daughter, Cindy sank tiredly into a chair. Would Jenna have left here if it hadn't been for her unhappy love? Jacob had been the only one she had breathed since she was a child, and everything was going so well for them. And then, like a whisper, he just walked by like a stranger. And he had his eye on Jenna. I saw it. I'm a good judge of these things. It was like the Snow Queen in a book, like a guy's heart for a lollipop from a piece of ice. And Jenna walked along the forest clearing, breathing in the fresh air. Grasshoppers rolled merrily in different voices. Birds sang. The wind swayed the majestic crown of trees. Hearing the cuckoo, she stopped, decided to try the game, as in childhood. If it's even, then the wish will come true. And now I'm wondering if I'll meet the person I'm thinking about. I looked around. There was no one there. The old game didn't work. She was sadly reminded of the old days. She didn't realize that the object of her thoughts was now moving toward her. 5 minutes later, they bumped into each other on the forest path. He gazed intently at the young woman, and suddenly, like a flash, like an epiphany, all those stories of his life that James's father had told him about came alive, sparkled with warmth and vividness, and he realized why he had given his daughter that name. Because the relationship with Jenna was the purest page of his destiny. It was possible to remember them countless times they warmed and pleased, begged. Memory relegated him to the days of Marlowe and Smith's happy youth. I tell you again, if you don't stop making noise immediately, I will have you thrown out of class. I urge you to concentrate. Final exams are coming up. Jana Vladimirovna, the physics teacher, corrected her glasses with Poland on the tip of her nose and continued explaining a new topic. The door was ajar to the classroom. Slowly surfaced breasts, and then dimensional bodies. Kathy, the headmaster. Excuse us a moment. Adriana. She walked to the back of the room. There in the courtyard of Jackson High School you were catching. She turned to the students and pointed to James, who had entered with her. Please love and pity him. Starting today, I'm taking him under my control. If you skip class, you'll have to deal with me. Jackson said hello, scrutinized his classmates, and made his way to a vacant back desk. But you're a fruit. Jacob winked at his friend. He shrugged indifferently and nodded to the girl. A couple of days later, as a May thunderstorm rumbled outside the window, the Jackson family was preparing for their son's 21st birthday. A statuesque black-haired woman was closing in on the kitchen table. A handsome man with a somewhat sly expression watched the game cooking in the oven. He carefully opened the cupboard door, once again filled his glass with Wermich, and sat down at the kitchen table, happily holding out the amber drink. James stepped out of Spain, strode into the hall. Nancy stopped arranging the dishes on the table and looked thoughtfully at her son. How fast has time flown by? He was a baby, and now he was a grown-up boy. She slowly sat down on the stool. Tears came to the woman's eyes. James, have you grown up? Graduated from high school and into the army. Quietly, she mumbled and sobbed. Mom, stop getting wet. He hugged her and gently wiped her wet cheek. The Nancy doorbell rang. Immediately fussed at the table, the shining face of Jacob appeared in the doorway. He came in and looked at his friend appraisingly. You've made your point. He commented on Jackson's strict new suit. Quietly, James put his index finger to his lips. Now the parents will be gone. Change. A present, right? He explained. I don't want to offend. Jacob nodded understandingly. How's the chicken? Nancy shouted toward the kitchen. When Rick heard his wife's voice, he rummaged around the kitchen with a glass in his hand. Finally, he set it down behind a flower pot on the windowsill and walked into the hall. His wife looked up at him. Yes, a cooked game, she said. Rick stepped in and shivered, allowing his wife into the kitchen. She opened the oven, pulled out a baking tray. The crust was covered with a pink-brown crust. The sweet smell of meat and seasonings filled the room. It was done. She turned off the stove, then took a ravioli and a bottle of Wermich from the cupboard and silently handed it to her husband. But all the guys turned, she turned to Jacob and James. Make your own mashed potatoes. You'll be splitting up. Knock on the wrong door. She opened the door and walked out of the house. Nancy was called out by her husband. "Why did you turn around?" She forgot to take off her apron. Nancy laughed, took off her apron and threw it over her head. Her spouse sidestepped the grinning boys. Jacob deftly caught it on the fly. Soon the cake arrived with the delivery. Accepting it, James bowed theatrically. "Thank you heartily for such an appetizing birthday present for my best friend. May it be yours." The bakery clerk was startled and hurried to close the front door. James went back to the apartment, went into the hall, and put the cake on the coffee table by the window. Then drained the water off the potatoes. "I'll have the potatoes," he called Marlowe over. "And I'll go and change my clothes." On the whistle and under the nose rhythmically melody. Jacob smoothly opened the refrigerator, took out milk butter, and plunged into the process of cooking mashed potatoes. When the dish was done, he tangled the pot tightly in a terry towel, grinned contentedly, and headed over to his friend's house. James had already changed into a dark blue Empire, tight blue jeans, and was triumphantly retrieving 2-liter bottles of vodka from under the couch. Jacob whistled happily. "And I thought I'd have to settle for a crown. How did you manage? Did your father show solidarity?" James handed the bottles to Jacob. "He's a world-class entertainer." Jacob winked at his friend, went into the hall, and put the bottles on the table. Insistently assertive, the bell rang. James headed for the front door and opened it from the threshold. The guests gave a friendly shout of "Happy birthday! Happy birthday!" "Thank you." James bowed playfully, rolling the whole thing up. The noisy crowd barely fit in the narrow hallway. James immediately rushed over to the tall, slender brunette, Sveta Maxikova. He helped her take off her windbreaker, placed it on a hanger, and sat down carefully, removing her shoes from her flawless feet. The classmate tipped her head slightly. Sveta laughed contentedly. James stood up. She wrapped her arms around his waist and lightly touched her lips to his cheek. The young man. Then, closing her arms, confidently took him under her arm, and they walked to the table. And Jacob accepted the clothes from his companion's John. And looking at the filled hanger, he walked to the bedroom, folded the jackets on the sofa, and returned to the guests. They were rattling their plates in friendship, pouring themselves cold appetizers. James was pouring liquor. When the doorbell rang again, at last Jacob's favorite, Smith, showed up. "I don't like her very much. I only invited her for a friend." "Oh, you're lying." "I wouldn't mind a light chuckle myself." With feline grace, putting her foot on her leg. "Yes, yes." She cast a sly glance at Jacob. He was in no hurry to open it. James patted him on the shoulder. "I'll get it." Marlowe waved his head negatively and headed for the front door himself. It really was Jenna. "Happy birthday, James." She greeted Jackson. "You don't mind my company?" "No." He smiled. "Come on in. You can undress in my room." He nodded guiltily toward the coat rack and strode toward the bedroom. "Jacob will show you out." The girl nodded and followed Marlowe. The room was in semi-darkness. Jacob held out his hands to help the girl take off her cloak. With a familiar motion, she threw it off and put it on the back of the couch. "Let's go to everyone." Yes. 12 pairs of eyes. Hand in hand. They appeared in the doorway for a moment. There was silence in the room. James flew over to Jenna and pulled her to the table, taking a seat next to them. Jacob sat down next to Sveta across from them. So Jackson rose from his seat. "Finally, everyone is gathered. So let's have a toast to my coming of age. And wish me a happy birthday. Happy birthday." The guests cheered in the midst of the fun of the light. Dancing with James from behind his shoulder, watched Jenna. Something about her was beginning to annoy her a lot. Imperfect, sure. But there's something about her, she pondered. The boys are bursting at her. Soon, they'll break their eyes. Beautiful, thick, golden-colored hair, slightly oval, not falling below her shoulders. She's not badly built, but she's clumsy. I'm much more graceful. The dress is not bad. Straight, one thin khaki color. It's a good eye color. The chest and the cleavage is nice. What can I say? She has taste. Her legs are slender. but mine are longer and much prettier. Her eyes are either gray or gray-green almonds. You can see the shape. That's where she gets her rest. Mine are just huge lakes. Can you drown? Yes, but what's that look in her eyes? The caressing, thrilling look of sensuality. Skin as pale as milk. Lips very beautiful, medium-sized, straight nose. Sharp chin, self-taught. Still, she is very attractive. Svetlana pressed her lips together resentfully. Something my queen frowned. James kissed her ear and whispered, "You are the most beautiful. She's a long way from you." He nodded toward Jenna. Maxikova shuddered. She ran her slender fingers through James's thick hair, looked into his mesmerizing black eyes. "And you know all this about me." And she wrapped her arms around his neck and gratefully penetrated his lips. He responded to the girl, but he himself furtively still admired Jenna. What a thing Zamora was, and how had she blossomed. A sweet, luscious, young girl, but too right. What to do with her? Jacob couldn't help but admire the girl from childhood together. It wasn't until recently that he realized who she had become to him by her eyes. An open smile, an infectious laugh. Literally, everything about her seemed warm and familiar to him. He stood up and asked Smith to dance, but the tune suddenly ended. James quickly jumped to the music center, set a new track, and the music spilled into the room. That clever rascal, drowning out the human voices. Jacob put his arms around Jenna. Her closeness made him feel infinitely happy. She tossed mismatched hair over her face. Jacob said slightly audibly, "Your hair smells of the summer variety." "Really?" She looked embarrassed. "You don't like it?" "No." He gently touched her lush curls with his hand. "Do you like it?" "Very much." The girl laughed softly, and Jacob felt that she relaxed in his arms. The girl, swaying to the beat of the music, rolled in the palm of her hand a delicious pink apple. She looked at Jacob with Jenna and smiled contentedly. The feeling that had erupted between them pleased her. Sure, Jacob was a prominent guy, handsome with a charming smile and monarch eyes. He was an object of attention for the opposite sex, but James had been her loyal admirer for years. Yes, and his looks were demonic. She looked in his direction, tall, slender with perfect facial features. "He feels every movement of my soul." A smile plays across his face. He gets up from the table, walks over, touches my neck, gently runs his fingers through my hair. There is no peace next to James. Girls are crazy about him, and so am I. I'm in love with his searing black eyes and hair the color of a crow's wing. His humor, his plasticity. I'd tear anyone apart if she wants to take him away from me. Jenna. All right, that's it. I mean, you gotta admit it to yourself. Good girl. The girl, in an impulse, hugged James, pressed tightly against him. A small shiver shook her body. Abruptly, she took a big bite of apple. Droplets of juice appeared on her lips. Sveta looked at James, and in her blue eyes danced the fires of fierce, all-consuming passion. The music ended. Jacob and Jenna stood in the middle of the room, unable to look away from each other. Then they sat down at the table, and without paying attention to others, enjoyed each other's company for the rest of the evening. By midnight, the guests began to leave. James, who had been drinking a lot, came up to Katya and took her hand. "I've decided to see you off after all, baby." He staggered a little. The girl gently withdrew his hand and waved her head negatively. "No, I'm with Jacob. Let's go retired." Sveta chuckled, holding out his jacket to him. James slung it over his shoulder swaggeringly, clapped his friend below his back, and followed the others outside. Jacob helped Jenna put on her coat, and they went downstairs. The street smelled of rain and spring freshness. The girl took Marlo under her arm. "And if we get that prologue back," she extended her arm, "we'll be at my house in 10 minutes. I know a longer way." Jacob winked at the girl. "Normal heroes always take a detour," she laughed. All the way they chatted, and Jacob caught himself thinking that he was easy with this girl, carefree, simple, and heartfelt. And so the newfound happiness did not last long. For then Clara burst into his life, wrapped up in his vicious passion. She stole his father and his only love from him. Jenna, of course, hurriedly left the city, went to Moscow. There she entered the medical school. In general, he lost her. Along with happy memories, Jacob was covered with a dark past. That he spent with Clara about it, he now could not think without disgust. Away. He didn't want to drown in it again. He was admiring. Jenna hadn't changed at all. Even better now. He stepped closer, her hair smelled the same. Her eyes looking at him with the same love. No, it can't be. Am I dreaming? I just came for 3 days. I haven't been away for almost 4 years. My mom was scolding me. How are you doing? Jenna pretended not to know about Jacob's problems. He acted like he didn't have a blackout. It's okay. Let's go for a walk. I live with my dad. And I have a daughter, and he has a granddaughter who's heard about this story. What a horror. Well done, you did the honorable thing. I guess we're responsible for those we tame. What's her name, Jenna? Oh, great. So we're namesakes. Yeah, Jacob smiled. You'll get to know her. Anyway, they walked hand in hand for a long time, like they used to. They reminisced a lot about childhood and youth, laughed a lot, especially long laughs about how he would walk her home, choosing the long way around to be near her longer. Jenna noticed that Jacob was limping, but still did not ask anything. He opened up on his own. He told how he had miraculously survived the accident, how he had been treated in the hospital for a long time, and then spent a year recovering. With pain in his voice, he told about how he had found the girl. And then suddenly he asked, "Are you married?" "No," laughed Jenna. "I have not met someone like you," and blushed. Jacob pretended not to notice the embarrassment of the girl and hiding, seized by his excitement, said goodbye at her house. "But it's okay for now. I'll see you around. I see your mom. She's watching out the window like she did when she was young. You're coming to meet your namesake." "Of course I will." "Yeah, my mom's a Sherlock Holmes in a skirt." While Jacob, despite being tired from the road and excited to meet her, Jenna stayed up all night. Thoughts swirled endlessly in her head. How come their paths had diverged back in high school? Why had he become indifferent? It was obvious even now that he needed her. She felt that Jacob truly loved her. How today his eyes shone with happiness. You can't hide that. Yes, he did. He'd gotten his memory back in one fell swoop. As soon as he saw her, that means something. And she, oh, how she wanted a confession. But it didn't happen. Something unknown to her had happened in the past, and today he was silent. For the next 2 days, the old friends were inseparable. Little Jenna joined their company. They took many walks in the forest belt, picked strawberries together, counted cuckoos and shrieks together, and laughed. They were good together as they had been long ago in their school days. Daughter Jacob in such an atmosphere felt at ease, as if in the company of peers. But it was. Jacob and Jenna immersed themselves in their happy childhood. Jenna's mother, when her daughter ran home for a snack, she just shook her head. And when she was about to walk her to the night train and heard that Jacob was going to do it, she took a little offense, but only a little, because she understood. They stood on the platform, hushed, watching the approaching train. Jenna's heart plummeted somewhere downward. She grabbed Jacob by the neck. "I've always loved you alone." Jacob kissed her back long and tenderly. "I know, kitten. I just realized everything too. Only now it's probably too late." Jenna didn't answer him. She got into the carriage all the way back to the capital. Only nothing went well for her there. And in a month she was rushing to Minsk again. When the train approached the station of her childhood, she saw a young man sitting on the very bench boldly labeled Jenna. Plus Jacob took a closer look, and Jacob jumped off the foot of the carriage, rushed to meet him. And he was already limping a little too, and rushed toward her. "Did you not leave here for a month?" The girl whispered in his ear. "Yes, I waited." He laughed and hugged Jenna tightly. "I felt today that you will come back, and I will not let you go anywhere now." Jacob hugged the girl even tighter. "Let's go, my love." Tears of joy spurted from Jenna's eyes. They flowed down her cheeks, and Jacob tried to stop them with his kisses, saying, "Come on, Jenna, we're together now. It's okay." And taking hands as in the good old days, and immediately went to his house. Dazed with happiness, we didn't talk the whole way. And what to say when everything is clear? It was very good for the two of them.